To conjugate or not, part 2. Last chapter, we talked about the fact that if in Spanish you have a sentence that has 2 clauses, think of them as 2 mini sentences in one sentence, and in the second clause there's a verb that follows a preposition. So a preposition being something like without, sin, al, upon, para, in order to, por, by, de, which might be with después de, after, hasta, until. So if a verb follows one of those prepositions and there is no change in subject from one clause to the next, as you see in the picture, it's the same hiker girl that's in each of the clauses, then the verb that follows that preposition does not have to be conjugated. You just leave it in the infinitive form. In English, a lot of times we'll have the gerund form follow that preposition, but in Spanish, you just leave it in the infinitive. So Guille did the falling, and Guille did the tripping. So we don't have to conjugate this verb after the preposition here. Guille se cayó después de, and this is where you just put the infinitive form. Another example. They rested until they saw the bear. They did the resting, they did the seeing. So there's not a subject change from one clause to a next. The preposition, until. Ellos descansaron hasta, now we don't have to conjugate, ver, hasta ver el oso. What we did not talk about last chapter was that there is a possibility of having a conjugated verb if there is no change in subject from one clause to the next. So here we have the same hiker girl in both clauses. She's doing something, and in both clauses she's doing the action. The only way that you can have a conjugated verb, if you're going to have a conjugated verb instead of an infinitive, is by having that preposition followed by the word que. This will make the preposition an adverbial conjunction. So chicos, Guille fell after he tripped. You can hear in English the verb is conjugated. We can do a modification of that same example we did just before this, even though there's no change in subject, by saying Guille se cayó. We'll have después de again. Now to have a conjugated verb, I can't just say después de tropezó. It sounds okay in English if you translate it, Guille fell after he tripped, but grammatically, you cannot just have that conjugated verb there. To have the permission to have the conjugated verb, you need to include that word que. Que starts the new clause. They rested until they saw the bear. Once again, there is no change in subject, but if we wanted to have a conjugated verb, you have to have the que. Ellos descansaron hasta que vieron el oso. So the choice to have a conjugated verb or an infinitive follow a preposition when there's no change in subject, it's totally up to you as the speaker or the writer. It's whatever you want. You can do it either way. And chicos, one thing about the prepositions, because of grammar complications, we aren't going to use antes de plus que plus a conjugated verb yet. It will require you to use a verb tense that you're not going to learn until Spanish 4. So for right now, you may use antes de when followed by an infinitive, but please don't use it with que in a conjugated verb yet. All right, third structure, third pattern that you can follow. If there's a change in subject, so here we got hiker girl again, but over here we've got a bear. So there's a change in subject from one clause to the next. Once again, que must be used after a preposition, since que gives you permission to have a conjugated verb after a preposition. So here, the boys ran after the bear scared them. Let me reread that. The boys ran after the bear scared them. So the boys were the subject, or is the subject of the first clause, the first mini sentence, and the bear is the subject of the second mini sentence. And in order to have scared conjugated, we need that que. Los muchachos corrieron después de, here's where que goes in, el oso los asustó. Los muchachos corrieron después de que el oso los asustó. Another example, going back to Manuel and Kiki. Manuel fell in love with Maria, so he is the subject of the first mini sentence. After Kiki broke up with him, Kiki is the subject of the second mini sentence. So since there's a change in subject, you are going to have to connect these two mini sentences with a que. Manuel se enamoró de María después de, here's where we need the que because we're going to have a conjugated verb, de que Kiki rompió con él. Manuel se enamoró de María después de que Kiki rompió con él. All right, let's move on to the práctica. Would you please just look at the sentences here and decide if you would have to have a que or not? So I'll give you a minute to think about it. All right, let's try the first sentence together. The bear ran after them until Felipe lost the backpack. Well, I see two mini sentences here. The bear is the subject of the first one. Felipe is the subject of the second one. So there's a change in subject. So I know if there's a change in subject, I have to connect these two mini sentences with a que. So chicos, el oso corrió tras ellos until hasta. Here's where I have to have the que. Felipe perdió la mochila. El oso corrió tras ellos hasta que Felipe perdió la mochila. The second example, after seeing La Peña, the friends decided to rest. So here, the friends are doing the seeing, the friends are doing the resting. There's no change in subject. So after this después de, I can just write ver. Después de ver La Peña, los amigos decidieron descansar. With a slight variation of that sentence from number 2, after they saw La Peña, the friends decided to rest. You can see in English, both times they conjugated the verb. So we can do that in Spanish. You just have to have the que. And the que gives you permission to have a conjugated verb after a preposition. Después de que ellos vieron la peña, los amigos decidieron descansar. It's just going to brag about how, hey, look, my typing's better when I'm not in front of the whole class. But as you can just see, it's not that much better. Número 4. The bear ran after them until Felipe lost the backpack. The bear is the subject of the first mini sentence. Felipe is the subject of the second mini sentence. I have a change in subject. I have to use que to connect those two mini sentences. El oso corrió tras ellos hasta que Felipe perdió la mochila. And finally, sino, but rather, but instead, is not a preposition, but very similar to the prepositional phrases that have to be followed with que in order to have a conjugated verb. Sino also has to have a que if you follow it with a conjugated verb. One thing about sino, the sentence is going to be always start with no, because you're saying not this, but rather that. So in this sentence, the bear didn't eat the boys, but rather the sandwich. El oso no comió a los muchachos, sino el sándwich. And I don't need to have a que here yet, because what follows is a noun. So when it's just but rather something, you don't need the que. However, if you're going to have a conjugated verb, they didn't lose the compass, but instead it got broken. There we have a conjugated verb. So, ellos no perdieron la brújula, sino que it got broken. Se rompió. It is the understood subject. Sino que se rompió. So there, chicos, the que allows you to have the conjugated verb, much like in the above examples. So let's look at our two prácticas. Kiki didn't forgive Manuel, but instead broke up with him. I hear that there's a verb here after the but instead, so I know I'm going to need a que. Kiki no perdonó a Manuel, sino que rompió con él. The second, Manuel didn't marry Kiki, but rather Maria. After the but rather, I don't hear a verb, so I don't have to have que. Manuel no se casó con Kiki, sino que María. Oop, I just did what I told you not to do. Sino María. Manuel no se casó con Kiki, sino María. Y esto es el fin, chicos.